music running in the background. Like I just was getting
Tim, you're frozen there.
Getting my dance on. Hey, good afternoon.
Broke the internet there for a brief second.
What's that, Tim?
You broke the internet for a brief second there with your dance moves.
I know. It's like that new 30-second countdown with the jam and music. Like, woohoo! So, hey everybody, happy Friday afternoon. Team Tim here once again with our powerhouse Tim Schnur, Jesse Miller, myself, Dylan, and a favorite guest, Chris Johnson from CompTIA. Hey, Tim, just say a quick hello. Give us a 30-second Team Tim, and then we'll move right along, and we'll move on to Daryl and everyone else.
Awesome. Yeah, great to be back. I missed a week last week, but excited to be back on the show with Team Tim. Special guest this week's Chris Johnson, a.k.a. CJ. No relation to the Borat, CJ.
Hey, Dylan, come on in and say hello.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Dylan with SideF. Happy to be here today and excited to have the discussion this afternoon about CompTIA and Trust Trademark.
Always good to have you, Jesse, my friend.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. I'm glad to be here, and I'm super excited about what we're going to be talking about today because it's all about baselining an environment, and not just any environment, but your environment. So really excited to get into it with CJ today.
Jesse, when did you start picking up reading? Look at all those books behind you. Like, what is going on?
Well, this does happen to be a stock photo, but I do enjoy reading. I'm actually going through On War by von Clausewitz right now, and it's been quite enlightening on strategy in business. So
interesting. I just got done Extreme Leadership by Jocko. I always mess his last name up, but it's a very interesting book. Being from the military, like a lot of his concepts and what he was talking about are something that's kind of already ingrained in what I've, my military history of 13 years. Like, I could see where, like, those that didn't come through the ranks or whatever, like how it could be very impactful for like business leaders. So enough about the book banter. Right. Let's welcome our special guest, CJ. How are you? Give us a quick little introduction.
Hi, good to be here. Like I've been following the show for a while, and I have to say it's whoa! I just went really big screen. I love the show. This is great. I love the banner that you guys do. And so I've been recently hired by CompTIA. I guess I'm quickly approaching 1 year here. I think June will be 1 year. And one of the things I get to do is I oversee the cybersecurity compliance programs at CompTIA. And it's kind of some sort of whatever you call it, fulfillment. If you ask for it or you wish for it, it might just happen. And I've been involved with the Trustmark at CompTIA since 2013.
Wow. And
so not the original. I'm not an original OG with regards to the Trustmark when it came out in 2008. But when I came on this past year, or the past 2 years being involved with the new Trustmark, Tim, when you and I first started working together on the Trustmark controls, et cetera, to now being an employee here is like, strangely, and as nerdy as it might be, dream come true. I'm very passionate about seeing managed service providers, having been one myself. PTSD still ensues, but to help other MSPs see light at the end of the tunnel that cyber maturity is obtainable. It's not a novelty.
Yeah, I totally hear it. And you know what? Like, rumor has it that is an actual bookshelf behind you.
That is an actual bookshelf behind me.
Real books. Yeah.
Real
read
books.
A couple of titles. Do I see like Windows NT Administrator Guide in that title list?
I don't know if there's Windows NT, but I have the PC Roadkill, which is an amazing book on the legacy of technology and the things that have died along the way or been left along the side of the road. It's a worthy read.
That's awesome. We were having a little banter the other day in Slack about somebody recreating the scene from Office Space with the printer and the baseball bat. We kind of had our own version here in, backwoods New Hampshire, which was not printers, but hard drives and a shotgun. We'll just leave it at that. So, oh yeah, hey Adam, yep, the A+ certification guide. Adam, good to see you. Keep those comments coming. So today, CompTIA Trustmark. What the heck is Trustmark? What does this even mean? Like, I mean, I know what it means, but to our audience at large, Chris, give us the 2-minute elevator pitch. What is Trustmark? What does it do for my MSP? Yeah, give us the quick little elevator pitch if you'd like.
I think this is the question of the ages. Every MSP is looking to, I shouldn't say every MSP, largely MSPs would like a way to differentiate themselves from their competitors. And everybody's being driven down this path of either from their insurance, asking them to show proof of some level of cybersecurity posture, or their clients now asking for it. And so you're kind of in this, it's like a catch-22. It's being driven from one of three ways: client, insurance, or you literally are motivated yourself to go after something that you believe you can do. And so we are an industry that's not regulated in the United States, right? So if we look at other countries, the UK is an example, there are some cybersecurity regulations. And I think one of the things that we would say here in the US is that we don't want that to happen to us. It'd be better for us to self-regulate than to be dictated and regulated. So, and I think part of the reason that we haven't seen it materialize in the United States, especially, we make up a small enough percentage of the gross domestic output that it's not.
Big words.
Yeah. So what it ends up happening here is like, okay, well, if we're going to say we're going to regulate MSPs or solution providers or VARs or however you want to, break it down as to what I qualify as far as my business, well, good luck, right? Good luck regulating something like that. And so one of the things that has come out is the reboot of the Trustmark would be to say, how about you use the Trustmark to show proof that you are an MSP or whatever you want to be called, but you are at least defined from a security standpoint at a minimum of having something like the Trustmark in place, so that at least the security posture is there. How you offer your professional services, well, we can keep that under wraps, right? Like that's your secret sauce, and more power to you.
Yeah, that's perfect timing, right? So you said self-regulate, right? So a couple months ago, Team Tim, we were talking about SROs, self-regulatory organizations, right?
Yeah.
And the White House came out and said, we're going to potentially regulate, not MSPs per se, right? They were talking about software. So the timing's perfect, right? CJ, in terms of, why
couldn't be better timing.
Yeah. Why do we need to do this? Oh, by the way, this CompTIA is this perfect organization. It's nonprofit. And they're looking to bring best practices. I know some people don't like to say that, to MSPs, and there'll be a certification process. There'll be an audit process. And, so I think it's awesome. And I'm really glad you're the guy running it, and the timing is perfect. So
it takes more than a person to do this. So CompTIA obviously is big shoes with a lot of resources here at CompTIA, and then the volunteers. Tim and I have been working on this as part of when we built out the control set. That was a year-long process. And as we got closer and closer to, man, we got to wrap this up, at least put some shrink wrap on it and tell people hey, please check it out and tell me that this is reasonable to obtain or to achieve. That was probably the hardest part. I mean, I can tell you that when we came down to the sort of the final steps in the race here, it was, if it's questionable as to whether or not it's reasonably obtainable by the average MSP, at least for today, it probably shouldn't be there, because I mean, Tim and I have talked about this. You get one shot. We get one shot at this. And if we screw this up, then either it's going to go defunct and roll to somebody else,
right?
Or it just doesn't happen. And we come back at this, a year from now, 3 years from now. And at that point, I think 3 years from now, we may be looking at what does regulation then mean if we don't have something in place.
Yeah, I want to back up. Because I love getting into the weeds. I think we can get into the weeds a little bit deeper, right? But let's just start with, you mentioned, we don't have regulations, which is really interesting to me, because when you look at like banks and you look at like SEC and you look at financial organizations and all these different verticals in, what'd you say, the gross national product, when you look at all these different verticals in the US at least, right, all these other industries, well, they do have regulations. Like look at the legal profession, for example, right? So you can go to school, you can get all this stuff, years and years and years of training, but then you have to pass this thing called a bar, right? And the bar is the organization that says you can be a lawyer, right?
Right.
So making those parallels as an MSP, right? As an MSP, we know like we have access to some very sensitive stuff and some very like private stuff. Like we have the keys to the kingdom, but yet
we are the keys.
But we're not regulated.
Right. You know, you mentioned that like other industries, Tim, and I happen to be in the financial industry, galaxies a long time ago, right? And they did want to self-regulate, and they messed up, right? And they didn't get it right. And the last thing you want is 100 senators telling you how to run your business, how to govern your business. Yeah, right.
Well, we just saw it with the FTC ruling that just came out. Actually, it goes live June 9, June 10, and that will impact anybody that processes financials. So if you're selling cars out of what used to be a Pizza Hut and you're providing loans to your customers, you're now bound by a pretty substantial security rule.
Well, I mean, FTC doesn't just, Hunter's laptop. Yeah. Thanks, Adam. Right. So exactly. So that's the point. Right. So who mentioned FTC? Was that you, Chris?
Yeah.
So FTC, like, and we talked about this ad nauseum. I've been yelling at the top of my lungs since December when the changes were announced. It's literally right around the corner, 9, 12, 19 days away, whatever. It's not just car dealerships,
right?
CPAs, right? Anything in financial matters, right? Point that we're trying to make here is, how does this relate to Trustmark? How does this relate to, as an MSP, getting my own house in order, right? And I know I've heard it from a lot of the smaller shops, like, we're going to be put out of business, right? Like, don't try to regulate me. I know what I'm doing. Well, the reality is you might know what you're doing in some very specific pieces of technology and areas of your work, but there's this whole other stuff that, like, not to put them down, but you have blinders on because you just don't know. And when Chris and myself and the other members of the team started to look at, hey, let's put a program in place that can help MSPs build the defensibility, protect themselves, protect their clients. And also, let's make it attainable. Like, let's not make it FedRAMP moderate or FedRAMP high, because, that would scare them all away. The point is that not having the government tell us how to regulate ourselves, and by taking this first step as a community, starting to put together, like, we think this is how we should be regulated. Right. And it's obtainable. And we have experts that have been in the space, like CompTIA. It's not some run-of-the-mill program that just like showed up last week, right? So, I think, Eddie's got a really good question here. Let's see. Purely focus in terms of their own process, practices, requirements. Sure. So Chris, why don't you take this one?
Okay. So I'm going to say this one is, today, it is focused solely on the MSP or solution provider space. And the reason being is we got to walk before we run, crawl before you walk kind of thing. We've had lots of requests like, hey, I want to do this client facing. I see the opportunities. And it's like, yes, no question. And I would even go so far as to say that today, as you go through the Trustmark, there are definitely going to be some areas where your clients are part of this process. You can't just say, I'm just going to do this for myself, asset inventory on things that you're responsible for that might live in the client environment. So there will be some of that. And I think what this does is it will open up the opportunity for how to position yourself with your clients and to start thinking through, like, if I was in my client's shoes, what would I expect from my MSP that's providing these services? What does cyber hygiene look like to me, right? Like if I'm your client and you're my MSP, I should be able to look at a set of criteria and go, wait a second, maybe I should ask a few more questions than I have. And I understand like that could be painful for some, but we're seeing this happen anyways, right? What insurance questionnaire today seems to be written where each question seems to only ask you one thing? I've seen quite a few scenarios where you look at the insurance question, and if you were to actually write, in fact, we did this, Tim and I, we picked, I think of the 30 insurance questionnaires, we went through and said, how do these questions, how do they get mapped into the Trustmark? And so one question might be like, I had to solve 9 safeguards completely in order to actually satisfy the question. Now, who's answering the question from an insurance provider going, well, I'm going to put yes here. And like, oh yeah, I should go back and make sure I actually did those 9 things that I needed to do to say yes to this question.
Yeah. So getting into the weeds, right? So before, and again, we're going to get there. We have plenty of time, right? So we've established, number one, like as a community, we either need to start putting together the people, process, and technologies to regulate ourselves, or somebody else is going to force us to do it. I personally want to be part of that program to make sure that we are putting the things that are actually attainable for us. SROs, as Tim mentioned, self-regulatory organizations, right? Who better than to lead that charge than the massive organization that CompTIA is, both from the community perspective, but also the technical expertise of people like Chris Johnson and myself and others, and the Jason Slagles and so on and so forth, right? So, Jesse, before we move on to getting into the weeds, thoughts around the SRO, thoughts around being regulated, any of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, a couple of different thoughts that I have, and one specifically is that we as a community, as MSPs, we're the type of community that can do this and can execute it successfully. I mean, the MSP community is a vibrant community. I mean, just go look at the MSP subreddit, right? That is a super active, and I'm on Reddit all the time, and I'm in a ton of different communities, and that's one of the most active, most helpful, and most caring communities that's out there, right? So we can do this. That's number one, and we should do this. And we want something where it's not being dictated to us, like you said, but we're all working as a team and helping each other out. And then number two, going back to what I always tell my clients, right, when I'm helping them build out their security programs, you have to eat your own dog food. It's one of the best ways to, I think it was Chris that mentioned it, start really thinking holistically about an advisor to your clients is to do it for yourself, because it's going to open up all sorts of things that you weren't thinking about. It's the age-old adage that, the carpenter's house is the one that always needs the most repair, right? Because you can do it, but because you can do it and it's so easy, you're like, I'll do that. I'll get to that next week. I got to handle this for my client. And it comes from a good place. You want to help your clients.
Right.
And so this, to you like, my clients before me, right? And that's a good place for your heart to be. But it's like put on your own oxygen mask before you help others type of thing. So.
Exactly. Great points there. Sorry, my screen was a little messed up. I keep getting things popped up in my face. Stop commenting. Actually, feel free to keep plugging those comments in there. We're hoping that we can stump Chris and Dylan and Tim with some of your hard questions, right? Dylan, thoughts on the SRO before we move on?
Yeah, I actually had 2 thoughts. And the first one is with self-regulation. I think that brings in a lot of collaboration and education across the board for a lot of people. And that's really empowering, I think, for MSPs. One of the things I was thinking about as well, and that Chris brought up, was from a client's perspective. If for the smaller MSPs, or for maybe MSPs that are reluctant to moving forward in this direction, as a client, it would beg the question, why the reluctancy to change? In an industry where change is happening every single day across the board, I would think our MSPs would be early adopters of it and maybe the leaders in it. So that's kind of where my thoughts go with that.
Nice. Yeah. Thanks so much for that. Like change is inevitable. And who better than to lead the charge than to the people actually doing the work and living and breathing it, right?
Absolutely.
When you get, I hate to say it, when you get politicians and regulators and all that, like don't get me into that mess, but when you get into
they're going to pick winners and losers, and you don't want that. Yeah. So
exactly. So Chris, so we started out with who better than to do this and kind of the why behind it. We can talk a little bit more about like the marketability of it, right? So
Sure.
Like, yay, I'm an MSP. I got my badge of honor. Well, okay, no, it's way more than that, right?
Right. Yeah, and I think you bring up a good using the term badge. I think that's one of the things that has plagued our industry for a long time. We know that you can't be HIPAA certified because it's not a thing. Yet, how many websites have you been to that says we're certified by something that is in that vein? And it's a sticker, right?
I became a certified pastor so I could officiate my daughter's wedding. It took me like 12 minutes and $20.
Yeah, and if you want, I can send you a collar after this to really make it official, right? Like, the little
I got the black shirt. I just need the white piece, right?
Yeah. So I think the problem with badging is there's nothing wrong with it, but there's a problem with it in the context of what we've seen in our industry, and that is I'm putting the bumper sticker to give you confidence. And while that part is okay, it's when you go a little bit further into this, it's like, why is that sticker important? Or what should I be asking you because I've now seen the sticker? Honk if you love Jesus. We've all seen those, or something along those lines.
Is that like the Talk 2 badge I can put on my website?
Right. And so something about a badge seems final. And I want to be clear that the Trustmark is anything but final, right? So it's not a starting point and an ending point. It's a journey, and it doesn't ever stop. So we talk about this internally. Wayne came up with sort of the 3 states that you can be in at any given time. Cyber readiness would be like step 1. Then you have cyber aware. Like, you're now aware of the gaps and the things that need to be remediated in your organization because you've started through the Trustmark safeguards and said, oh, wow, I didn't realize I wasn't doing that. Or maybe I am doing those things, but I haven't documented them well. So I would have a hard time providing evidence if someone asked for it. I couldn't do it in very quickly. And then the third one is what we call cyber resilient. And cyber resilient is a state that you can fall out of, right? You're not always going to be in a perfect state of cyber maturity. Like, it's an ongoing thing. And the example that I was given the other day was thinking of it like the Grand Prix. Cars go around the track however many times. And no matter whether you're in first place or last place, you still periodically stop to change your tires, to fill up the gas tank, to make sure that the safety and integrity of your car is still intact. That's kind of what we're looking at with the Trustmark. Like, once you've achieved the certification or have been assessed and gotten the Trustmark, you go into, now it's a continuation. Every year you're going to be put before an assessor. Every year you're going to have to renew to maintain the Trustmark. So it's not a, hey, we don't have to do anything until, December 2024 because we got the Trustmark. No, you should be continuously improving your cybersecurity posture as an ongoing effort. And one of the platform partners that we've incorporated happens to be on Fort Mesa, is one of the early participants in providing the GRC space for an MSP to track that. And so I bring them up and bring it up right now because previously in the old version of the Trustmark, you literally were answering questions in an Excel spreadsheet. Yay, that's fun. It's very difficult to maintain an Excel spreadsheet and ensure the integrity of it over time. So we think this will be hugely powerful for our members to go through something that is actually dynamic and will show them, like, as they progress, how they're maturing and where they still have deficiencies or need to remediate. Yeah. And so I think that's the big change from previous Trustmark till now. Also, I think when they did it before, we were a little ahead of the curve as far as MSPs really desiring having the Trustmark. Now it's a big deal to say, I have been assessed. And we're seeing this across the board, right? SOC. Wow, I just drew a blank on ways you could be assessed for, but SOC would be a big one. And the value in that is there because it means that you have done something. But we're saying with the Trustmark, you are all in for scope. Not I picked a server or I picked my remote office. That's, I only am there 3 days out of the year. No, this is like your entire organization is included in the scope.
I'd love to hear Tim, like the 10, I think there were 10 people in that working group. What was the mission? Like what were the controls that are part of the CompTIA framework?
Yeah. So Chris,
yes,
awesome job, right? So
Yeah.
lots of things to unpack there, right? Lots of great comments coming in. Let's break this down a little bit piece by piece, right? So, all right, Lisa Marie, smaller MSPs, right? Not having the funding, trueness with their clients, right? So Lisa Marie popped that comment up here a few minutes ago, right? So let's just back up, right? When we look at something like a SOC 2, right? Everybody's asking me, do you have SOC 2, right? And for those of us in the space, we would say sort of industry average for a SOC 2 assessment, whether or not I agree that's the right thing or not, whatever, though, keep that out. My opinions on that. Like 20 grand and up. So
yeah.
$20,000 spot check over a period of either 90 days or 60 days or whatever, right? So there's a spot check, for lack of better terms. Maybe it's a 1 year, who knows? And maybe you redo it every year, who knows? But it's 20 grand or up.
Yeah.
Once you find that scope, right? But when we look at like a CompTIA and we look at the Trustmark program, it's not a $20,000 nugget today, right? It's an affordable method for us as small MSPs to be able to back up and say, we know what we're doing, and CompTIA thinks so too.
Well,
right?
and I think it's important to note that just because the cost to a CompTIA member, say for a fully assessed, I think is $2,500. So once you've gone through the whole program and you're annually renewing, the actual cost is being absorbed.
Pump the brakes.
Yeah.
So my MSP today, I can get a CompTIA, I can go through the process and I can get sort of level 1, kind of IG 1, 2, 3. I can get that for $2,500.
So if you were to do a spot check and you wanted to do the self-assessment first, so
Okay.
you have a window of 2 years out of the gate to get through to fully assess, because we know that, and kind of to who was it that said, the smaller MSP, yes, it's an annual thing. And so we don't want in the year one for someone to go, there's no way I can get all of this done in 1 year. That's okay. Take the first year, and what would happen is you would get a Trustmark in progress image, where so in that first year you could do what we call the self-attestation, which still has an assessor looking. They're going to spot check, make sure you've got documentation looking like it should, as opposed to like, and
documentation.
Documentation. And I think that comes out to oh man, I'm totally drawing a blank right now. It's $1,450, I think. So there's a 250. What's that?
$1,400. All right. So let's just.
So let me clarify the cost real quick, just so we're all on the same page. Application is $250. That gets you stood up in the program, and that gets applied towards your, whether you do fully attested in the first year or you do self-attestation. And then, so if someone said, hey, I'm going to do this all in 1 year, but I want to get spot checked before I continue, you could spend upwards of $4,000 in year one. I don't think that's the norm, but regardless. Yeah.
I'm ready.
Yeah. Okay. So there you go. And so here's the thing that I think you also need to know is that CompTIA is absorbing the real cost of going through and having someone do the assessing, right? Like, we're not saying we're reducing the assessment down to $2,500 so MSPs can afford it. No, we're saying that CompTIA is helping absorb the actual cost so that the smaller MSPs can actually afford to do this.
All right. So bring this back to baseline. There's, much like CIS, there's levels of implementation and levels of attestation. I love that word, but a lot of people don't know what that means. Levels of, I hate to say, certification. That first level is you going through the program yourself and getting spot checked along the way, right? So that's good, right?
Right.
Then, like I hate to boast, like my MSP that's been FedRAMP moderate for years, like, no, we're just going full bore because we
Right.
know we're ready to go because
Right.
we've been living and breathing it for 17 years. But to answer Lisa's question, and for those smaller MSPs, like, start someplace, and you can start very easily, very obtainable, and very inexpensively for less than $2,000, right? And you can, and that's the whole thing that I love about the program is it's iterative, right? Jesse, we talk about this a lot, right?
And I don't know any event that's happening in the next, say, 3 to 6 months that doesn't have some element of policy development, how to tackle a CIS control, how to, culture shift. I mean, if you're at IT Nation Secure, which is coming up, I know there's like multiple pre-day working sessions that are all about exactly what we're talking about right now. The industry wants to help every single MSP that's serious about their cyber maturity get more mature. No joke. I don't know any MSP or vendor that I have talked to that's serious about cybersecurity that isn't like, how can I help you be successful?
That's and that actually pulls up a really good comment that came in a few minutes ago about, let me see, the king of the world. Hey, Chris, you're king of the world. What does this look like, right?
So, I'm reading the question of, as king of the world and I could implement the Trustmark without challenge, what does the perfect implementation look like? What's the dream? Well, I think the dream would be that I can go to sleep at night. If I was an MSP, if I can go to sleep at night knowing that I am doing everything that is reasonable for my MSP with regards to my cybersecurity posture. And so I think about CIS, a great example, because largely CIS is a big part of the control set. In fact, it's well over half of the total number of controls. When I look at a CIS control, I always tell people, like, forget all the things that you might need to do. And remember one thing, what's the intent behind what is being asked of you to do? Not all the things that might seem like you need to do, but like, what was the intent? So when they say things like two-factor authentication, or they say you should have 26 character passwords, I don't think anybody says that except those of us that say you should have as big a password as you can. But the reality is, like, if you think through the intent, usually you can obtain what is intended by the question, right? No two companies are the same size. Mm-hmm. No two companies are the exact same in revenue necessarily. And the point is, these are going to be implemented or interpreted uniquely per MSP based on their portfolio, their posture, their like fill in the blank, right? So I think that's one of the challenges we have, and that's why I'm so excited about this program coming to fruition. Is CompTIA members are made up of very diverse and unique organizations, and we're all coming together to say, how can we help each other be successful, and in along the way show that to those that we're trying to serve. I don't want to hire somebody that doesn't take security seriously, right? But I also don't want to pay more money for their services, right?
Right. And so Jesse, I know Jesse talks a lot about like getting yourself more mature and kind of streamlining. Like, Jesse, talk a little bit about that, would you? And we can lose your audio. I cue you up. I throw you the curveball and swing and a miss. All right. What about you, Dylan?
I think it's great for like we were talking about. It seems almost insane providing security that we wouldn't be viewing it in a responsible manner. Regulation is going to come one way or another, and I think being proactive, it goes with your train of thought, does it not, Tim? Left of boom, right? We want to be proactive in this regard, and taking responsibility for that is huge.
Right. So yeah, we talked left of boom last week, right? We're going to keep talking left of boom. We're going to keep talking being prepared, right? I'm going to keep pushing shift left, right? But that's not the point of today. Yeah. Today, Trustmark, right? And so we talked about the SRO. We kind of touched a little bit about pricing. here's a good one. Let's see. Is not understood. Marketing, promoting, nice. Others promoting. So, and I don't know why Keith Nelson's comments aren't showing up in the feed, but Chris, sort of 2 points.
Yeah.
Like, we talked a little bit about badges, right? So, and Keith Nelson brought up like other organizations are looking for licensing and certifications. Like, make the parallel. Like, my son-in-law trying to become an electrician needs to go through these things to get his journeyman and eventually his master's. Yeah. Like, we don't do that for MSPs. Now we can, or work towards that.
I mean, that you just really said it. I mean, that's the point. So once you've been assessed, that is then recommendation to go before the accreditation board. So the accreditation board would be an independent, unbiased third party that says, through the review of what the assessor found and their recommendations, we're going to give it a little bit of a spot check, if you will, and say that we agree that based on this assessor's findings and recommendations, we want to move them on to being fully accredited. And here's the Trustmark, which means that every year, the only way you can keep it is to continue to be assessed on an annual basis.
Oh, wait a minute. Am I hearing throes of CMMC?
Don't go there.
No, but no, I'm not. I'm making the parallel. So as a federal government contractor, and we get what's called authorization to operate, we go through these assessments. Well, it used to be every 3 years. Now it's quarterly, right? So yeah, I think compliance isn't one and done, my friends. You've heard me say this. It's an ongoing, continuous monitoring, iterative process, right, Jesse?
Right.
That's right. Yeah, it's. I love the fact that you can get started, do a self-attestation, and then move into an ongoing management thing. I have a short farm story if anyone wants to hear it regarding that. So
always down on the farm.
So the other day we raised a bunch of chickens this year. We had 37 to be exact. And the farmer behind us, I traded him to plow one of my fields for 6 chickens. So in any case, he came to get his chickens the other day. And when we picked up our chickens last year, we over perfected this process. We had to make sure everything was perfect. We got our dog kennels. We put some hay in the bottom, went and picked up our chickens, made sure they were comfortable. Well, the farmer shows up to get his chickens with what? Used feed sacks. So he picks up the chickens, stuffs them in a sack, throws them in the back of his truck, and takes them back to his coop. So the moral of the story is sometimes you just got to stuff the chicken in the sack and get going.
That sounds very pleasant.
So we had a question here as well. Does Trustmark account for MSPs that work remotely, don't have a brick and mortar building, which a lot of MSPs, right, are remote for sure. But an office at a home on a completely different level from the living space. Clearly CIS controls account for that, right, CJ?
This has been, and Tim can attest to this, we've had so many conversations of how do we take what is largely CIS and some other controls taken from ISO 800-171, 853. The best example is this is more about what you do with the environment you do have, not us dictating what environment you need to have. So we're not going to tell you that you need to have a brick and mortar office. I think that if you have a brick and mortar office and everybody works out of that, in some respects, it's a lot easier to navigate because you may only have to have one policy for something like firewall and network security and network access control may be very limited if everything is out of that brick and mortar model. I also know that it's not realistic to say that if you had 15 employees pre-COVID that worked in an office, you sold the building after COVID because you're like, why go back to the office? But now you have 15 locations. Are you going to pen test each one? If I don't know about your experiences with pen testing, but one test is expensive, let alone do 15 of them.
Mm-hmm. Wait a minute. Isn't that? Never mind. Don't get me
well, and
going.
then that also gets into some of the areas of where we had to pull back. I think every MSP should have a penetration testing program established. That doesn't mean I'm saying, hey, tomorrow, because you're going through the Trustmark, you should go have a penetration test. That is not what we're saying.
Mm-hmm.
So it's this balancing act of recognizing that while there are things that you should do or need to do in the future, you're not going to boil the ocean and try and get all of this done tomorrow. And I've had MSPs go, well, can I do this inside of 30 days? Can I get it done in 30 days? Maybe on the documentation pieces, some of it, but I'd argue, how are you going to do reports that really need to see 90 plus days of reporting before you would really have enough evidence collected to actually satisfy what's in there? And no, when you start the program, I don't want the 90 days from before you started the program. I want you to start the 90 days after you engage in the program.
So what you're saying is, wait, I'm an MSP. Can't I just put a couple checks in a box and call it done?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think that we should love to say, check the boxes. That being said, we know there are boxes that need to get checked, right? Like, to your point, yes, it is not a checkbox model, but I think that that's also something that if I was looking at the program today, going back to if I was the king and I could do whatever I wanted, I would start with checking boxes. That's the first thing I would do, because what am I already doing as an MSP? I mean, we didn't pick CIS just because.
Right.
CIS largely is prescriptive and obtainable by MSPs because they do these things. Like, you look at all of the other industries, how do they get done what's in their security rules stack? Oh, wait, they hire an MSP.
Yep, they do. In fact, I just, just got that doesn't matter. I was going to say, I just got a reference from a medical company that has a really solid IT team that got a security questionnaire, and their IT team's like, we don't know what to do with this stuff.
Sure.
I don't have a penetration testing tool. What do I do with vulnerability management? So, the industries at large are getting asked are you doing these things, right? We as MSPs, we're the technical experts. When we look at the controls and we want to adhere to, industry standards, sure, there's a bunch of them. We can say, yep, I have backups. Yep, they're immutable. Yep, they're offsite. Check. Yep, I use 2FA. Yep, we have a password manager. Yep, we do training. Check. And we have the documentation, the policies, and the procedures to back that up, right? Now, the policies and the procedures part is something that a lot of us lack on, right?
All of us. just call the kettle black, right? All of us lack documentation. There wouldn't be vendors out there like IT Glue if we were great at documentation. We wouldn't need vendors to create a product to make documentation easy.
If only there was something. Sorry, I'm selfless plug. Yeah. So
you gotta have CJ plug in. You can't plug yourself.
Yeah. So all right. Let's get into the weeds of the controls since we're kind of in this conversation.
All right.
We mentioned CIS,
yep.
Right? And Chris and myself and a bunch of really other smart people kind of went through all the frameworks that we know about, and we cross-mapped and we dissected and we ripped out, rearranged, and realized, oh, this control is the same thing in all 15 frameworks worded slightly different.
Yep.
Okay, we're just going to call it one thing.
Yep.
And so to Lisa's point earlier, and I think Keith's point and a couple of the others that have been posting in the comments is we developed the framework in order to be obtainable. Like, not big, hairy, lofty goals, right? But we wanted it to be obtainable, but also make sure it's CYA and you're doing the things that you should be doing to protect yourself and your clients.
Yeah. So where do you want to go? I mean, the deep dives. I mean, it is almost.
What's outside of CIS?
Okay.
How about that?
Yep.
Because we know CIS very well. And why did you add those extras? I guess?
Yeah, that's a good question. So CIS by its very nature lacks a few things. It doesn't talk about environmental and physical security. It doesn't talk about governance and leadership. And quite honestly, while it talks a lot about having a policy or documentation within a control, it really doesn't talk about things like SSPs or system security plans or written information security plans. And I'm not saying that to say, oh, please go write one tomorrow. That's not what I'm saying. But we actually have a category in there that's actually just called policies and procedures.
Governance.
Because what we don't want to see is like, man, there's 170 some controls in here, and I've got to write a policy for each one. No, that's not what we're saying. I also don't want you to think that you have to write a policy specific to just the control. You may already have a policy that has inclusion for things that might show up throughout. So let those live independently of the controls themselves and bring them in as you see fit.
Right. And the job's going to be to be able to look at your documentation, to ensure that change management has happened, that these have been governed, that you just didn't download, copy, paste, and pretend like you've been doing this for years. And they're going to read that and be able to align it to the framework where applicable, right?
Yes.
Not 107 controls, 107 documents. No, because, and this is what happens to me and a bunch of our systems is they want a document for every little, like not just the control, but all the subparts. And I'm like, and I have to relate, and there's no good way to relate, and it's just awful. So
that's the other reason for CIS, in my humble opinion, is when you look at a control and the safeguards, or security best practices, now what CIS calls it, those safeguards inside those controls are supporting, right? They roll up to. Not all frameworks do that. There are frameworks that literally, like, you're in a subsection, you're like, why is this here? What does it have to do with this control? So there's that. So going back to what else? So I would say largely outside of knowing a few things about CIS that was limited, like leadership, those kind of things, were areas where insurance questionnaires really dictated what we needed to include. So I don't remember off the top of my head. I think it was Cowbell. It had like 14 questions. I'm like, cool, I'll take that one. Chris is looking for an easy day. It took me 2 weeks to solve for 14 questions because one, none of the questions being asked in that questionnaire were in the Trustmark control set. And I was struggling to find frameworks that contained specifically the questions that they were asking. And so to give you an example, one of the questions was, do you have a security officer? Now we know that exists in other frameworks, but then it gets really granular and it goes, does the person oversee the security and awareness training program and have KPIs to measure its success? And I'm like, and funny, NYDFS 500.2, 500.4 gets very specific around how to do that. And I'm like, well, I guess I got to pull that in. So there's three controls that you didn't know about that are in the Trustmark. There you go.
There you go. So
seeing that, Tim, right? NIST CSF 2.0, we're saying the same thing. Like, oh, this leadership, governance, like empowerment, like
privacy.
Yeah, we need to add that. Yeah.
Privacy. Yeah, I think, as the industry matures and we begin to realize, like, we set some foundations, we set some things up, as we continue to iterate, we realize, oh, we forgot a whole governance domain. We should probably add that. Oh, we forgot a whole privacy thing. We should probably add that. And as we grow and iterate, like, this isn't the first version, right?
No.
This isn't going to be the last version, right? We're going to continue to see our industry evolve as it has already, even in the last 6 to 9 months.
We're on version 1.7, if that says anything. And I think we just did 1.7.1 was the latest revision. To Tim's point, Tim Schneer's point, we have a lot of changes coming that are being shared with us through, NIST CSF. And we just saw a new ISO. They added, 11 new controls. Largely, if you look closely at most of them, they've all been talking about privacy. I'm not saying that's the only thing that's being talked about, but privacy is a big deal, right? And I started thinking about our world and what we're dealing with as IT service professionals. Goes back to the beginning of this conversation. We are responsible for a lot of data that we're supposed to keep private. We're supposed to protect it. The Trustmark is going to continue to evolve. It will constantly be in a state of flux because the industry, we are not going to keep up with the industry technology changes. Like tomorrow we could say, all right, guys, let's talk about OpenAI and ChatGPT and fill in the blank something AI. And all of a sudden we've gone down a rabbit hole. Here's the thing though, if there's current requests in the Capitol today talking about how to regulate potential downsides to ChatGPT and others, what are we doing in the Trustmark or to be Trustmarks where we take into consideration those very same things because we can evolve and adapt far more quickly than Congress can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Dylan, what do you think about this so far? What are your thoughts about kind of talking through some of the control stuff?
You know, the whole concept of moving forward, as much as we like to educate and push a cultural shift to our clients around cybersecurity, Trust Trademark is going to be a cultural shift internally, I think, for MSPs regarding their controls. And I just
I hear you, right?
Yeah.
So for those of us that have like started with that corporate culture a decade years ago, right? It's just second nature. So I have to always remember, like, not everybody is where the Jesse, the Tim, the rest of us are here, right? So if I had to you hear me say this all the time, like, start someplace, go get on the wait list for Trustmark, right? Go download start someplace. And so, Tim, what do you think, my friend?
No, I got a question for Jesse. Jesse, his big role with these MSPs is he's just advising them how to make money with security, right? So, what do you think, they're going to ask you, what do I think about this Trustmark? So I guess, what do you say to them, and how do they, what's the ROI on this one, right?
That's a fantastic question. I was actually going to turn that around at Chris, but I'm going to instead of being rhetorical about it, I'm just going to answer your question here. So the inevitable question you're going to get is, okay, how much time am I going to have to spend on this per year, and what resources are going to be involved? Because I'm not doing that today. Okay. So, and where's the ROI there? Yeah. Okay. Well, of course, there's the intangibles, being able to prove to your clients that you're secure, helping change that culture, right, Dylan? So when you go through that, that's going to start turning on light bulbs in people's heads. So it's actually partially a cultural reevaluation. Those are two intangible or secondary benefits, I think, about it. But I think the biggest benefit is I know everyone out there is starting to see vendor questionnaires from their clients and from their clients' clients and from their clients' insurance. So wouldn't it be nice to have all those answers ready to go instead of having to have a fire drill every time a questionnaire comes down from your client? And so right there's a huge ROI, because you could have all those answers ready to go, pass them across the table and say, yeah, we're good to go. Maybe clarify a few things, but just having done third-party risk management for many clients in different programs, it's a breath of fresh air when you get a vendor that says, yeah, we're secure. Here's all our answers. I used to be an auditor, and when you got an answer like that, you kind of gave up after lunch. You're like, yeah, these guys seem like they know what they're doing. And so, but the minute you find problems, then you dig in. And so you want to be the former, not the latter. So I think
the Trustmark is that, right? So if you have the Trustmark, our goal would be that an insurance questionnaire can be solved by saying, we have the Trustmark, which is why we put so much energy in making sure that the safeguards in there actually address the questions being asked in those questionnaires.
Yeah. So, I mean,
Tim knows this, right? So if you want to sound like a real security, like you've got your house in order, they're like, oh, let me see your Trustmark. You're like, all right, sign an NDA.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to see your stock too. Nice.
Love it. Yeah.
For your eyes only, we're going to use a special platform, and you might get a peek at my stock too, right? Because you're basically like, I know my stuff. I'm going to posture at you. I'm going to look at you, right?
Love it.
Well, but so to bring that back to the insurance questionnaire, Chris, right?
Yeah.
So I have to walk.
I mean, insurance carriers participated in this effort too. It wasn't just it wasn't just like, hey, let's go get these questionnaires. Hey, would you donate or volunteer? Because how many of them, like, unless it's going, they'll say things like, this questionnaire is for your eyes only. Like, why? Like, right? But we saw a lot of that. So we had to work really hard to get insurance providers to actually say, we're willing to give you the questionnaire. And that was painful. I mean, Tim, how many we back and forth for weeks to get some of them. They're like, well, why do you want to see it? Well, I want to, get around it somehow and cheat so you can give me the best policy ever. That's my goal, right?
No.
Right.
No, and thank you for saying that, because I'm trying to walk the line on what I can and cannot say here, right? So, yes, insurance companies took part of the work group that we had last summer putting this together. So, with the goal being to answer your question, Jesse, like, yeah, Mr. Insurance Cap, here's my Trustmark. Or when your client's insurance carrier asks you, like, we're seeing third, fourth, fifth party risk going downstream on, like, every security questionnaire that I filled out in the last year has asked, are you using a managed or IT service provider, and what are they doing, and a bunch of other stuff. Now, as an ITSP or an MSP, I can be like, sure, sign my NDA and look at my CompTIA Trustmark.
Yeah, and think about these two situations here. Okay, one is the insurance company asks for the MSP's information from a client, and you give it to them. You have it all right, and the client has not done some things you want them to do. It's an easy conversation now to say, okay, we need to get those initiatives moving forward. But what about the other way? You've been pitching security to your clients for a year, gotten them to do all this stuff, and then the insurance company asks you what you're doing and you fail. How does that look, right? So you do not want to be in that situation. You want to be in the situation where you
don't want to be the
ahead of the game.
cobbler.
Yeah, that's right.
I just got an interesting comment actually DM'd to me in LinkedIn, right? And it was around the community aspect, right? And I don't know, Chris, I don't know if we've discussed this, and maybe it's on the roadmap, but the concept is great. We have 1,000, 10,000, 5 million Trustmarked MSPs. And then an incident happens, because we know it will. Is that community available? Right? How does that community then going to help us respond? Like, I'm a Trustmark member. I just got blown up. Can y'all help me? Like, talk a little, because we know CompTIA is big on community, right? We know we have the ISO. We know we have a bunch of things. Like, does CompTIA and Trustmark play into that?
Yes. So CompTIA has stood up what's called ERT, or Emergency Response Team. And that does not require you to be a member of CompTIA to take advantage of it. If you have the blow up happen, you can get to it from the CompTIA website, but it's a standalone website that basically has toll-free number. It will route a call. It'll find first available based on region. So, and you should see more of that getting broadcast through the news outlets here in the next few weeks, because it's still kind of, some of the pieces are still being stood up, but yeah, it's a very active group. You mentioned some of the names that are participating in that. I have leveraged it on behalf of a client not too long ago. It was tied to the pig butchering scam. If you're not familiar with it, they go get you to invest in a cryptocurrency on a legitimate crypto exchange, that when you go to pull your money out, suddenly there are all of these fees and taxes, and all of a sudden you have to put more money in to get money out. And now the $1 million that you put in there, that's grown to say $1.5 or $2 million. Well, it's going to cost you $300,000 to get it out, and you still can't get it out because they're never going to give it to you.
Right. So, oh my goodness, head explodes.
Yep.
Coming to the top of the hour. We could talk this stuff all day long. I think it's extremely important. Tim Schnur, parting words.
Parting words. So I know we only got a couple seconds, but next week is a Thursday call. Brian Gillette's coming back on. We're talking about, security sales and concepts and stories and anecdotes. Jesse will have some great ones, I'm sure.
Awesome. Dylan, thoughts, parting words, leave us with a golden nugget for CompTIA.
Yep.
And Trustmark.
My thoughts, especially after hearing Jesse talk about his experience with clients, is it seems like the market is asking better of us. It's asking more of us, and as security providers, I don't think we should be reluctant to deliver that at all. And I think it's an opportunity to rise to the occasion, as we say, and that's where I see the real value. And as we've reiterated the first point, rising to the occasion kind of seems daunting, but the trust trademark is the great first step. It's the one tree as we begin to clear the forest, and that's where I see the real value in it.
Awesome. Jesse, parting words, my friend?
Stuff the chicken in the sack. Go get on that waiting list.
I don't know. Chris, can you follow that up with anything better?
I cannot follow
It's
it.
a hard
I will
act to
just say
follow.
this is a global initiative. So this isn't tied to the United States. It's not specific to North America. It is a global initiative. So I think it's valuable to everybody.
Awesome. So what you're saying is I can get my chicken nuggets globally and I can get a Trustmark to go along with it. Hey, thanks everybody. I'm Tim Golden from Compliance Risk here with Tim from Fort Mesa, Team Tim, Jesse, Dylan, Chris, always great. Look forward to next Thursday. What time, Tim? 3:00?
3:00 next Thursday.
Yeah, so I won't be there, but that's okay. Next Thursday, 3:00, go join half of Team Tim and learn about some selling some stuff. Do the like, comment, share, tell your friend thing, and thank you so much, everybody. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Thanks, everyone.
Enjoy the weekend.